everybody. The Women's History Conclave welcomes you all to the first Uttara Chakraborty Memorial Lecture to be delivered by Dr. Paula Banerjee, Professor, Department of South and Southeast Asian Studies, University of Calcutta, and former President Mohanirban Calcutta Research Group. Is there an echo?
Yes.
Slight.
Please put your. I think I also have.
এতগুলো অন করে রাখলে পরে প্রবলেম হবে।
Okay. Professor Banerjee will be speaking on the surrogate subaltern refugee women in Bengal 1947 to 1957. The session will be chaired by Professor Shomita Sen, Ware Harmsworth Professor in Imperial and Naval History, University of Cambridge, UK. Professor Uttara Chakraborty was a historian with remarkably eclectic interests and concerns. Medieval Indian and European history, the history of pre-colonial Calcutta and the Bengal Renaissance fascinated her equally. She successfully transmitted her enthusiasm for these areas of historical scholarship to her students through her lectures within the classroom and beyond, and also through her writings. Her overwhelming and abiding intellectual concern, however, was to unravel the lives and doings of women who had traditionally remained hidden from history. She was especially committed to retrieving Muslim women from the seams of history. Professor Chakraborty broke new ground in the field of Indian women's history by unraveling the vicissitudes of Muslim women's journey towards empowerment and emancipation in colonial Bengal. The daring exploits of women revolutionaries such as Beena Das, Pritilata Vadedar, and Kalpana Dotto intrigued her, and she delved into archival records, including IB files, to uncover tales of bravery as well as the daily encounters with patriarchal mindsets that underpinned these revolutionary women's struggles for the nation's freedom. Professor Uttara Chakraborty spearheaded an initiative to build an archive at Bethune College, the college she was posted at from 1992 till her retirement in 2004. The chance discovery of papers belonging to the college office in the late 19th and early 20th centuries opened up a gold mine. In fact, it was this archive building endeavor that inexorably drew Professor Chakraborty to the field of women's history. The old and withered papers that she had taken such great pains to preserve unfurled evidence that not only revolutionized established understandings of the contributions of Bethune College to women's, including Muslim women's higher education, but also women's role in different strands of the freedom struggle. History had to be rewritten, and this task Uttara Chakraborty willingly embraced. It is our grave misfortune that death took this great scholar away from us last year on 29 November. On 7 December last year, the Women's History Conclave paid homage to this great historian in a program held online on this platform. Now, to honor her contributions to women's history, the members of the Women's History Conclave, have decided to organize a special lecture in her memory every year. This is our first Uttara Chakraborty Memorial Lecture, and the speaker is Professor Paula Banerjee, a person who was very dear to Uttaradi, very close to Uttaradi's heart. Now I request Professor Shubh and also Shomitadi. Shomitadi was also somebody whom Uttaradi loved, truly loved. She was in great awe of her, and the two shared a bonding that was really very rare in these days. Both Pauladi and Uttaradi, and of course we, her students, we and myself and Bhashwati were not her students directly. I mean, we were not taught by her in the classroom. But yes, we would interact with her. She had given us a lot. She had shared a lot of her research findings with us. She has even, I mean, gifted us a lot of her books. Some of the books are not available. So even after her demise, I was fortunate in having a book that she had planned to gift me. That was in the footsteps. The name of that book is In the Footsteps of Chandramukhi. Thank you, sir, for giving me that, handing me over this book. This is, I mean, I'll preserve it all my life. This is something which is very precious to me. Now I request Sir Professor Subhash Ranjan Chakraborty, our teacher at Presidency College, and also as we all know that that he is Uttaradi's husband for decades. I mean, they had shared a very very good, very strong, strong bond of love and love, friendship, and mutual understanding. They had been by each other's side for years, for decades. I mean, they had been probably, I mean, as far as I know, they had been classmates at the university, and they had even taught together at Darjeeling. So, Subhash Babu, please I request him to say a few words on this occasion. Sir, please, apni jodi kichu bolen.
I thought my job was to be present and savor and share the memories that you would be talking about this evening and listen to Paula's special lecture. I know how knowledgeable she is on what she'll be speaking on, and to listen to Shomita as well, a few words. Let me take this opportunity to put on record the deepest gratitude that my family, my two sons, daughters-in-law, and our granddaughter, Uttara's two brothers, sisters-in-law, and three nephews and one niece share with me for due to Women's History Conclave for taking the initiative, particularly to Dr. Aparna Bandyopadhyay and Dr. Vasudev Chatterjee, to Paula for not only so readily agreeing, but telling me that she is giving the lecture with the delight of a child almost doing something for the parents. And of course, Shomita, you all were very special to Uttara. I know that. Paula, we had shared this relationship for nearly more than 2 decades now, for a quarter century, thanks largely to CRG. But Shomita also had shared for quite some time a special relationship with Uttara, and I think what Uttara treasured very much, and we all do now, is the invitation to deliver the Prithilatha Vaddar Memorial Lecture, and not only that, to publish the book, which I think is a collector's item. The way it was printed, such a well-produced book, with the archival documents that Uttara had given a sample of the huge treasure that awaits researchers in the West Bengal State Government, West Bengal State Archives even now. I don't think it is the occasion for me to either reminisce or say anything. about either my very long time companion. As a student of our mine, I recently written a book called Friends, and she gave a copy of to me, to both of us, a few months before Uttara finally left us. And she said to Subhash Babu and Uttaradi, who were college friends themselves, something that Opon had alluded to. We had a long relationship, and well, I would just say two things about Uttara. One is Opona had given a very lovely summary that she had started teaching pretty early. She started in Patu school after completing her MA examination before the results had come out. And in 1969, she joined Darjeeling Loreto College, from where she came and joined Maulana Azad in 1981. I think from this first period of teaching, she had developed a personality that was basically one of a teacher who was committed not only to what she was teaching or what she was sharing with her students, but a sincere and very deep commitment to the students themselves. And this was returned in such good measure that I think even before she left us, she had a lifelong relationship with many students from her 2.5 years or 2 years in Padua school. Many of them are in their late 60s or early 70s now. And Loreto was also very special. Loreto was cosmopolitan. We did not teach together in Darjeeling. I taught in Government College, she taught in Darjeeling Loreto College. And again, she had forged relationships that continue even today. I could find only one link, and I think she may well be present today. Fatima Pays, who lives in Delhi, she was a student in the early 1970s, and she was very, very close to Uttara. And then she taught in Maulana Azad, Chandanagar, and Bethune College, in the Government College, after she had joined the Education Service. Bethune had given us a lot of leeway, and Bethune had provided the context for her emerging as an historian. You know, she started writing a little late. She was probably a little circumspect, a little hesitant in writing and in assuming her role as an historian. She remained a student of history and a teacher who communicated exceedingly well with her students. But it is Bethune that had given her the context and also a will to fight because of that, the zeal with which she fought and had the archaeological excavations done in the college is very fresh in our memory and the memory of many others. Not very welcome memory to all, I suspect. But nothing really happened. The archaeological remains, we do not know where they are stationed now. And a final report as to what the archaeologists found or did not find is not in the public domain. This did not discourage her. She wrote on old colonial Calcutta, started the archives with Shanta Sen, Shamuli Shur, and others. And you know, she lost herself. She plowed her own lonely field. And it was only later that she was acknowledged as an accomplished writer and an accomplished historian. Finally, I must mention that the last part of his life, which started once she retired, the last 9 years of teaching as a guest teacher in Presidency College, gave her a huge sense of fulfillment. The promise with which she had started in Patu Bhavan and Loreto College, Darjeeling, had come full circle and gave her a sense of total fulfillment after Presidency College. It was in 2013 that we both left, I think, with no regrets, to the authorities who were running what had already become Presidency University by then. But the memories, I think, are fresh, not only in us. It was in Uttara, and now I am the bearer of that memory. But I hope it is very much so in the students that she had interacted with in these 9 years. They would be a living testimony to what Uttara represented as a teacher and as a student. And as an author, historian. I thank you all again. I take it that the fact that you asked me to be a special guest and to say something is that along with paying tribute to Uttara and remembering her, you also give a formal recognition to a long, if sometimes a little bumpy relationship. I can see a little sardonic smile on the face of our elder son. And thank you so much. I think this is a very emotional moment for me. I feel very fortunate that I am alive and present this evening. Thanks to you. Thank you again.
Bhashyatidi, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us today. It's our privilege that you are here today and we can hear something from you. Last year, we were all so grief-taken. I think somebody said something, but you couldn't say anything about the incident or about Uttaradi. So this year, we are privileged to have you, and it's a real tribute to Uttaradi and to a scholar, a historian. It's not only a tribute we are paying from Women's History Conclave, but the School of Historians, Calcutta, I think, should pay tribute to her work, to her scholarship. So let me introduce today's speaker and our chairperson also. Please, I shall ask everybody to keep your mic muted because it's echoing very much. Today's speaker is Professor Paula Banerjee, best known for her work on women in borderlands and women and forced migration. She was former Vice Chancellor of Sanskrit University and the former President of International Association for Studies in Forced Migration. She is a professor and head of the Department of South and Southeast Asian Studies, University of Calcutta, one of the largest and oldest universities in South Asia. She is also the former director of the avant-garde South Asian think tank called Calcutta Research Group, winner of many awards, accolades, and fellowships. In 2013, she was awarded the Fulbright SIR, and in 2009, she won the Citra Simo Award. Her recent publications include Statelessness in South Asia 2016, Unstable Populations, Anxious States, edited in 2013, Women in Indian Borderlands, edited in 2012, and Borders, Histories, Existences, Gender and Beyond, 2010. She is the editor of Refugee Watch and the editorial board member of a number of international journals such as Oxford Journal of Refugees. And I also take the privilege to introduce our chairperson today, Professor Shomita Sen. Shomita Sen is Veer Hamsworth Professor of Imperial and Naval History, Trinity College, Cambridge. Previously, she taught history at Calcutta University and also School of Women's Studies, Jadavpur University. She was the first Vice Chancellor of the Diamond Harbour Women's University. She was Dean, Faculty of Interdisciplinary Studies, Jadavpur University. Her monograph, Women and Labour in Late Colonial India, won the Trevor Rees Prize in Commonwealth History. She is a member of editorial boards of various academic journals, including Modern Asian Studies and South Asian History and Culture. She is on the advisory board of the Review of Modern Studies, Economic and Political Weekly. She edited Global South, Cephis E magazine, a South-South platform for young scholars from 2004 to 2014. She was a member of the governing body of Calcutta Mahanirvana Research Group from 2014 to 2018 and General Secretary to the Indian Association of Women's Studies from 2008 to 2011. And her latest publication is a co-edited book from Sage 3 publication, Love, Labor and Law, Early and Child Marriage in India. And also I take this opportunity to say that I have contributed in this volume also. It's up to, the floor is now to Paula Di. Paula Di, please, the floor is yours.
Shomita di aage kichu to bolbe as chair.
Shomita Di, will you speak?
Well, not really. I'll just invite Paula to start.
So with your permission, Shomita di, half an hour, is that okay? Okay, very good. Now I will first say that as Subhashta stated, I was delighted when Aparna called me up, firstly because I think there should be a lecture like this for Uttara Di. She was really a very prolific person, and I will use a very non-traditional terminology, which was said about another scholar, that she was stylish to boots. And that is one thing that we always admired about Uttara Di, wherever she was. She was an extremely elegant person, and people might think that to be a very gendered look at her, but no, I admire elegance, and she was extremely elegant. And whenever I heard her speak, I learned a lot about how a person could hold herself firm and yet be so graceful. And so when Aparna asked me to do this, I was very happy. I was delighted. I called up Subhashta immediately, and as today I told Aparna, when she said, "I'm so glad you accepted this," I said, I would have been very upset had you not invited me to give this lecture. So I'm really delighted that Aparna and Bhashwati, they thought of me. So thank you very much. Today, I will actually get out of my own comfort zone and talk about women's movement, particularly the refugee movement. I call it surrogate subaltern. Now, this is again a terminology that I did not invent. I've just used it in this context, and it will be quite apparent why I call these women surrogate subalterns, because in any case, refugee leadership always considered refugee women leaders as subalterns. And when I talk about them, it'll be quite apparent why I term these group of women surrogate subalterns. Now, women, as we know, always work in networks, and Uttara Di was no exception. She was a team player. I remember in Calcutta University when we organized sort of a consortium on working on Muslim women. I don't know what happened to that, because for a while I left Calcutta University at that time, but Uttara Di was a very prominent member of that. So I will talk about women's networks also. The other thing, we all know about Uttara Di's work with Muslim women, but today I'm not going to talk about Muslim women. I'm going to talk about something that I have always seen animated Uttara Di to no end. Sometimes we used to pull her leg about that, and that was the communist movement. And I've had many a very friendly debate with Uttara Di on this. So I decided to get out of my comfort zone and look at, three things. First, the communist women, insofar as they became involved with the refugee issue, and gave leadership to the refugee, movement itself. Now, somebody can always tell me that you're talking about Monikuntala Sen, but she's not a refugee. So here I'm talking about people who, the women who gave leadership to this movement. The second thing that I would like to sort of bring out in this short intervention is that how the connections, because more than men, it's we know that women work out of networks, how that network contributed to women becoming leaders within the refugee movement. So when we look at the refugee movement, we often try to make it sort of a standalone kind of thing, or we always start the history from 1946 or 1947. But I will start it a little while longer. I will, and the third thing I will talk about is how that contributed to the communist movement. Finally, that became sort of the establishment, and that that acquired this sort of a aura that it led the workers or the subalterns in this endeavor. So that is why I will talk about women leadership within the refugee movement. I begin by saying that this leadership, insofar as it was shaped, did not come out of 46 or 47 alone. Now, I think if one looks at the historiography of refugee movement in the context of South Asia, or even in the context of India, one will see that there were certain, strains of this movement to begin with. If we look at, some of the first writings on this movement, which appeared in the 50s and 60s, this historiography is largely to do with the victimization of refugees. Now, I am not saying that the refugees were not victims, but what I'm trying to say is the refugee experience went beyond victimhood. And because the refugee experience is one of survival, so that really does not clearly experience, that not clearly tell us about what it was that really animated this movement. So if you look at it from the from the victimhood perspective, then a lot is lost. The other major strain that we see in this refugee, historiography of refugee experiences is, largely to do with the the popularity of cultural studies in the context of West Bengal. And I think here the leadership was given by the Center for Studies in Social Sciences and some of the fellows associated with that. And in that, the refugee experience is actually, in certain ways symbolized by the memories of Desh, Gram, partition, etc. And those were also, it sort of transcended from this victimhood picture, but it was also reductive. It brought the whole question to these notions of memories, to these notions of cultural experiences. Now, the third way of looking at it was from, to begin with, Prafullo Chakraborty and all these iconic figures in their books, they discussed about how the government totally failed to give rehabilitation to the refugee question, to the refugee communities. Now, the thing is, after that, in the 90s, there was a shift in that discourse. And then people like Shomit Das, Dipankar Sinha, Monica Mondal, and all these scholars talked about how the government actually was, in its own limited way, really tried to shape the whole rehabilitation movement, and how the government was actually able to do quite a bit for the refugee communities at that point of time. Now, the fourth major strand in this, again, I'm being personally very reductive. I'm just, there are plethora of works on this, but I'm trying to bring it together in 4 different strands, and there are exceptional work which doesn't fall into any of these historiographies. Definitely, I understand that. But the fourth is important because from there, a feminist sort of a look at refugee experiences sort of gained its prominence. And that is, if you look at the work of Joya Chatterjee or Shekhar Bandyopadhyay, etc., they talk about communities and community histories of refugee experiences. Sabyasachi Bosu Rai Choudhury also talks about the Andaman experiences. There are writings on Murid Chhapi, etc. So this is where I think in certain ways the feminist experiences started. Now, if we look at the feminist discourses on refugees within the context of West Bengal and India, we will see that it wasn't the West Bengal refugees or refugees in West Bengal that found credence. One of the first writings on refugee women has been written by Urvashi Butalia and Ritu Menon. And I still remember when in 1993, if I'm not mistaken, their articles came out in EPW. I was a graduate student in the United States, but we used to avidly follow EPW. And when I read it, this was quite an eye-opener. And later, when both Urvashi and Ritu became my friends and compatriots, I told them that had you not written those things, I would probably have taken up those subjects of study for my own research work. Now, after being inspired by their writing in 1997, I also wrote a little bit about the refugee experiences, women refugees. After that, I think Calcutta Research Group was very, in certain way, influential in intervening in this discourse, because then Calcutta Research Group brought out two very, very important writings on refugee women. One was Refugees in West Bengal, that book, which was edited by Pradip, who is no longer with us, Pradip Bose, and Shubhasda will remember that book distinctly. It talked about, Uday Vila and the role in that particular context. And also the next one was written by Asha Hans, who talked about refugee experiences, broadening it as a case study for other different kinds of refugee experiences within the context of India. Now, all of us, I think one of the limitations that all of us have faced with this is to think that the refugee experiences just came out of partition. That did not happen. My contention here is that refugee women's experience and this ability of women like Monikuntala Sen or Renu Chakraborty or Latika Sarkar, or for that matter, Abula Bosu, all of these came out of a previous experience, and that their networks were forged within the movement, the anti-colonial movement. And here, very significant is the Joshore Women's Students' Union. Now, all of these were actually a product of MARS, Mohila Attorokha Samiti, and there were different parts of Mohila Attorokha Samiti in all of West Bengal. Now, as a result of this, there were, women's union, students' union, where women were leading, and women's students' union all through West Bengal. Definitely in urban areas, but they had networks within the rural areas as well. For example, I will talk about how in 1942, let's talk about 1940 when Kanak Dasgupta was leading that women's union. And in 1940, her role was so crucial that she was one of the first women to be exiled out of Bengal because, she was so active. Now, one has to remember that this was within the umbrella of the communist movement. And till, I think, 1941, the party was, not a legitimate party because it was underground. But even in underground situation, these unions had their women counterparts and women's own unions. And young women actually had a very good experience of leading or contributing to this anti-colonial movement through these unions. And after Kanak Dasgupta was driven out of Bengal, she remained active in politics. But then people like Kalyani Mukherjee took up the leadership, and it was under her leadership that there was, sort of get together of all these women. Now, interestingly, the number of women, members who were part of these committees, according to at least some estimates, was more than 21,000, and this was no mean fact. Yet, even though we know that Monikuntala Sen was very much part of this group, but we never really trace her sort of activism to these sort of movements. But, in 1942, there was a get-together where members from different women's student union came together. And among these members, again, some of the names, even now I know some of my students are here today listening to this lecture. They will not identify, but those of us who are here, many of us will identify some of the names. From Joshua, the woman who was sent to this conclave was Geeta Roy Chaudhary, a young woman called Geeta Roy Chaudhary, who would later emerge as Geeta Mukherjee, who was, member of parliament, etc. So, this experience, I think, is very, very crucial. Now, once I talked about this conclave in Joshua, in the context of Joshua, something very similar was held in Calcutta in 1943. And here, it was sort of a non-partisan conclave where all these women came together. Interestingly, the chairperson of this conclave was none other than Indira Devi Chaudhurani from the Tagore family, of the Tagore fame. And among the younger generation of leadership that appeared in this 1943 get-together was none other than Abula Bushu, Renuka Roy, Hazara Begum, etc. All of these people were very influential later. So, so when the partition happened, these women were actually already experienced in activism, experienced through this organization for the leadership role that they were aspiring to. Because under the aegis of, the communist movement, if we look at the writings of either Renu Chakraborty or Monikuntala Sen, we will see that another unique experience was something that was, again, a very grassroots experiences. Middle-class women did not have that experience, and that was traveling with men for organizing meetings, for activism, etc. Now, we all know how Monikuntala Sen was, her father asked her parents asked her not to attend these meetings because she would had to go with male compatriots to these meetings. This happened before 47, but Monikuntala Sen, very interestingly, young Monikuntala Sen took her mother to one of these meetings, and her mother became so mesmerized with this movement that she became a very active supporter. So that is why I always say that, women also had the unusual capacity of drawing their family, of drawing their friends, and creating networks. So when Monikuntala Sen, Renu Chakraborty, or for that matter, Abula Bushu, they came to this movement, this refugee movement, they were already past master in this art of creating networks, going underground, traveling all over, and organizing. Now, when we talk about the post-partition refugee movement, one of the most important cases that we talk about are the UCRC movement, because, UCRC was one of the leading organizations that sort of, made the cause of refugees very, very important. I will now read out a little bit from Monikuntala Sen's biography, where she writes about how she was taking part in these movements and things that completely shocked her and surprised her. Now, this I'm quoting from Monikuntala Sen's writing. She said, "I was under the impression that women could not be party to violence. But thanks to what I saw in the Baliganj area, this was during the Kolkata riots, I had to abandon this illusion. I will not mention the name of the road I was walking down one day on my way to Rash Bihari tram line from Fern Road. I noticed a slight stir from the top floor of the houses women were throwing stout sticks down into the hands of the men standing below. I wondered what the problem was. It seemed that the Muslims were coming, and I assumed that they were coming to attack in a huge group. I was slightly scared too, as I was on the road. Then I was shocked to hear that all this excitement in the neighborhood was about a person wearing a lungi. Was he or wasn't he a Muslim? Later, when people found out who he was, they were reassured. I thought of something else. A few hundred brave people had come to put an end to this single individual. Why were the women handing down lathis to their husbands and sons instead of trying to stop them? Why does the madness engendered by the riots bring a person to such depths? Why does it wipe out the natural softness of a woman's heart? Why was this happening in our area? Had we inquired around, we would probably have come to learn that the picture was the same in Muslim areas. This is probably what happens when the animal instincts of a person are aroused. Humanity survives simply because there are exceptions coexisting side by side. Now, interesting thing about, what Monikuntala Sen was saying was, she was not posing as a feminist. She had a very gendered notion about women. She bought into the fact that women had soft heart, even though she herself was extremely versatile, extremely strong as a person. But it wasn't the usual feminist discourse. So I'm not saying, this was a feminist network, but it was a women's network. And what is important is this whole notion of inclusivity. And this is where the feminist movement and its relation to these early nascent women's leadership is important, because the feminist movement, whether you look at it in Bangladesh or in different parts of India, even though we critique it ourselves for its middle class nature, but one thing is certain, the feminist movement have been sort of the platform where many different movements have come together. So from the beginning, when one looks at Monikuntala Sen or Renu Chakraborty, one sees that even though they were party members, but their vision was very different from the run-of-the-mill party members or even party leadership. For one, unlike the male leadership, they always worked in networks with other members, women leadership, like the Congress Women's Leadership. Now, this experience, again, for example, is very important because, again, it comes from Monikuntala's childhood. When in 1923, Monikuntala was met with Gandhi, and she was extremely impressed with Gandhi's speeches, and she never veered away from that fact. And she always believed, as a woman leader, that women have to be working with each other to produce something. And she had a lot of interaction with the Congress leadership. And also one has to understand that Monikuntala's previous experiences made her very tough critique of the land reform movements. And, she was extremely critical of the fact, and she was one of the first people to point out that, land could be taken from the zamindars and the jotdars. Why is it being taken from the poor peasants? When refugees are trying to reclaim land, if it was often called the Jabardakhl colonies where refugees sort of came and settled. But, all these women leaders were extremely critical of that. And they said that this was a ploy of the bourgeoisie because they were making the poor people fight against each other. The extra land could be had from areas where, land was, available, and there were land because a lot of people had left those lands. So that could be given to them. And land could be taken from the rich, whereas what is happening is that people are being forced to grab lands from the peasants, from the poor people. So, this was a fight of one subaltern groups against another. Now, Monikuntala was, if you look at the 1943 program that took place, Monikuntala was a leader and a person who gave the speech on land reclamation and land rights. So here one sees her experience and her interest continuing from that. Now, the other thing is, all these women were very aware of the fact that the leadership was using women. In the sense, if you look at the 1951 UCRC, the marches to the Legislative Assembly, the picture, the visual representation, we have all seen. It is there in the cover of many, many books. You see 2 long lines of people going peacefully to protest, and there would be lathi charge, etc. And but the visual representation was women leading it. But actually, within the movement itself, women did not find important space. Now, the other thing that here I will talk about Renu Chakraborty, and Renu Chakraborty very, nicely brings out this aspect. She talks about the different colonies and the women's groups that represented these colonies and fought against both the state and the police. And one of the most important of these colonies was the Bhadrakali Mohila Samiti in the Bhadrakali refugee colony. And another was the Udbastu Mohila Samiti of Titagarh. And all through the 1950s, there were protests against, the mistreatment of these, refugee women within the colonies. Now, so much so that there were martyrs also, because we often say that one of the reasons why women leadership was not applauded or not upheld, whereas, all these women participated, there were many number of women, yet histories of women within the movement is often silent about women given leadership. How many of us know about the first women martyr in this colony? Her name was Binapani Mitro, and she was a pregnant woman who fought against the police atrocity in this. And these movements, Renu Chakraborty, for one, she gave leadership to many of these movements and organized these women. In 1956, hers was one of the most critical voices that said that, no matter what the amount of money that is there, could have already sort of rehabilitated most of the refugees, because over 10 crores, even at that time, she made this calculation that over 10 crore rupees was spent for refugee rehabilitation, yet that did not work because less than 10% was spent on refugee groups. And she was also extremely critical about the fact that all these women that were, given leadership to the refugee movement itself within these colonies, such as Sarojubala, Monjulika, Brahmo, Shurobala Shil, or Priyobala De, all these women, they were not allowed to assume leadership role within that movement. And even though both Monikuntala Sen and Renuka Chakraborty, or, there are many other women, they themselves assumed a partisan character and were elected to the Legislative Assembly, but they had a sort of an intellectual distance from, some of the male leadership that looked at the movement from a much more parochial standpoint, because these women understood that for any major changes. Now, these were the women who also were influential in, radicalizing the movement, so much so that by 1956, the government was forced to acknowledge that, land given to refugees, if this was land that was not under anybody's tutelage, or for that matter was not owned by anybody, particularly by the peasants. It would be handed over to the refugees. Now there is a post history to that, but by 1957 this movement acquired some sort of a legitimacy within people's mind, and again they again the other way that these people, the leadership within the movement, they radicalized the movement was because they talked about food, body, some of the most important necessities which the larger movement hardly ever addressed. So, this is the leadership that said that among the 128, people, refugees that were doing the Shotagraho by fasting, there were more than 48 women who were also fasting. We hardly ever, talk about women's representation in rank and file. The other thing that I will, and here I will take the name of Abula Bushu, the other way where these women contributed to the whole, not only to the whole politics of refugee movement, but also discursively also this movement changed and gave legitimacy to this. And this was Abula Bushu's efforts to create sort of, middle class training camps for women only, because one has to understand that women were looked upon and they were termed as the permanent liabilities. So women who were single were looked upon as permanent liabilities. But, it was Abula Bushu, her effort, and all the other women's leadership efforts to think about vocational training, to think about, now, you can always say that the cup was half full, and that is why they were not given training in all kinds of profession. No, they were not given. There were hardly any women who went into engineering, but they were given in certain kind of professions. And as a result of these trainings, these women who had to come into the public sphere per force also took advantage of that and started getting into jobs like nursing, like teachers, like, secretaries. And they were the first people to enter the public space, so much so that they revamped the whole notion of genteel women or Bhadra Mohila, and working women became or entered this rank of the, Bhadra Mohila. And if one looks at the biographies of these women, they were critically aware of the fact that no amount of regeneration will happen unless one brings in the laboring women. The peasant women, Renu Chakraborty, in her own biography, writes about how essential it is to bring in the laboring women into the discourse, because she's very interestingly talks about how the middle class women were people living on the top floor of a building and they couldn't really see downstairs. So unless you can see what is happening in the grassroots level, it is very, very important. It is very, very difficult to actually understand where the movement is going. So these women, through their experiences, through their networks, through their movements, where they talked about bodies, where they talked about not just esoterically about women's honor, but about women and their needs for food, for saris. Renu Chakraborty was in the forefront of a movement where they said refugee women should get 2 saris every 6 months because they barely had anything to put on their body. So it wasn't just questions about symbols of honor, etc. It was a question about everyday needs that they brought into the movement to radicalize it and also to contribute to the communist movement. So post 1957, this would be a different kind of communist party that would slowly emerge. And then by 67, it would be the establishment. But before that, all these women would come into politics themselves and radicalize the communist movement itself. And that experience they would bring from their refugee movement. And one of the main reasons why these women were so successful in these movements was because as refugees, they do not stay with just the refugee movement. Annesha has written about that, Annesha Sengupta, who's again Uttaradhikar Anandarup, I can see here. And Annesha wrote about how these women participated in the tram movement, in the teachers movement, in the food movement. So, they considered themselves to be citizens. They made claims to citizenship, and they figured unless they came into this movement frontally, they will always be treated as underdogs, as subalterns, and as surrogates to these movements. So they frontally came into these movements, actively participated in this movement because they wanted to establish their identity as citizens and not as refugees. So this is how they radicalized the refugee movement as well as radicalized the Communist Party movement afterwards. So with that, I think I'll end here.
Thank you, Paula. That was, as you warned us at the start of your talk, you're moving out of your comfort zone, and I could see that this was a very new direction that you're taking in your work. I could ask 2 or 3 questions, but I think I'll follow others in the questions. I think it may be best for us to take 2 or 3 questions first and then have Paula respond to them. Would people either put their hands up or put their questions in the chat box?
Yes. They can either type their questions in the chat box, or they can, unmute their mics and speak. We don't have this option of raising hand in this format. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can just raise your hands like
okay,
that.
yes.
But yeah, I can't see many tiles, so maybe I won't be able to see if you raise your hand. So do please come forward and speak if you wish.
I can see Apurva Chatterjee. He has a question.
Right. Will you speak?
Hello, yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I can.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I really enjoyed today's talk, and thank you very much for such insights, really. And I'm not an expert in this time at all. This is not my area. But what I was very interested by listening here is kind of a historiographical sense, rather, because you said that women were building up networks right from the colonial times that were later helpful in the refugee movement. And much of these networks were based on their own skills of like household activities, for example, interacting with neighbors, and then those levels of everyday interactions. And I was interested, like, how do we class this idea of housework, for example, as a category into analyzing women's initiative in general? Because I work on early modern times, like the very early period of the British rule in India. And when in my work on colonial women, for example, I think about how housework in the case of British women in India was also giving them some kind of avenues to think in general about the role of the British in India and how they were contributing to the British knowledge of India, the British women as such. So I was thinking, like, how do we categorize housework as something which can help us widen our understanding of women's contribution from the South, global South, when we talk about feminist ideals in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other question? Mohana, you?
Can I ask
Asha.
a question?
Yes, please, Asha.
Yeah, I first of all, my deepest respect to Professor Uttara Chakraborty and Ranjan Chakraborty, and my deepest sympathies with the family members. And thank you, Paula Banerjee, for a most illuminating talk. It was wonderful listening to you. When you ended, I suddenly thought, oh no, why did it end? I was enjoying listening to it. But what I noticed is the total absence of Muslim women. You were, at the beginning, I thought you would talk about Muslim women. Were Muslim women totally absent from any activity? So in your talk, I couldn't help but notice the total absence of Muslim names. Could you enlighten me a bit on that matter? Thank you.
Thanks, Sasha. Anyone else?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course. Please do.
Yeah, Polati, I just wanted to know because you talked about vocational training, Abul Abush, and I think AIWC also played a important role in this type of vocational training giving to the girls. And after that, this 1943 network, when after the famine, then the AIWC women also they also participated in this relief and rehabilitation, everything. And maybe Ashoka Gupta's name is very pertinent in this context. And another thing I just wanted to know, later the refugee movement, when Leela Nag, when she came from Bangladesh, I think she also played a major role in this UCRC movement. I just wanted to know from you, is there any connection, or they are totally working different from the left front, different way?
Okay, great. So let me then follow up with the question of my own, which is I was wondering about, I mean, this is something I've on and off written also about. Two things. One is that you have women coming forward in communist parties at a time when, in fact, when men in these parties are often imprisoned or underground, unable to really take forward, take leadership, publicly leadership positions. And this is particularly true in the 40s and 50s. So in a sense, women are able to take opportunity of, or are forced in a way to take leadership positions at a particular time. Does this have anything to do with what position then they manage to keep in the longer term? So that was one. And related to this, my question would be the link between women leaders and gender politics. Monikuntala Sen particularly is actually much more, she says this in her memoirs, that she is more interested in the women's movement than in class politics. She does do trade union from time to time, but her heart is not in the trade union movement. So there is among communist women a split between some women who are more involved in class movements, i.e. shorthand trade union movements, and those who veer towards women's movements. How do you think this division or this distribution play out in refugee politics as well?
Very good question, most of these. I will try to sort of respond. Again, as I said, my knowledge is also limited in a lot of things. My first response will be to Asha Islam. I'm terribly sorry. I am not saying Muslim women were not there. I know about, for example, statistics about the number of Muslim women within one of these committees. There were, among 30,000 women members, there were 11,000 Muslim women. But my take on this topic is from, either the police files that I was very fortunate because Shubhasda made it possible for me to see them, or from memoirs. I am sure with a different prism, one will be able to unearth, the Muslim women, but that is not something that I have done. And, I talk about, some of the women leaders, I do mention them by names, but I have not made a concerted study. And there can be these questions. For example, not many of these are indigenous women either. I have in other forums, I have worked on, for example, Northeastern women. So, in this case, there were indigenous people very much represented, leadership represented in these movements, but I do not talk about this. And I know that is a limitation because we generally talk about the Hindu middle class leadership. And that leadership was critical about the lacunae that you pointed out. And they critically talked about the lacunae. And, one of the things that I will go on to Shomitadi's question from here, and that is, who were the women who were catapulted to these leadership positions when the men disappeared from the scene? These were largely middle-class Hindu women who came to the scene leadership. So there were silences that I'm aware of. But, so I start off with a very limited look at it, and that is the connection of these women to the earlier politics and their connection to post-politics of the Communist Party. And we have to understand that the communist establishment, and I know Uttaradi was critical of that, was also, extremely against this gendered look at the either the party organization or what is espoused as the policies that the party would take up. And Uttaradi was spot on, and I think she knows more about this than me, that Monikuntala Sen or even Renu Chakraborty, they were actually very interested in women positioning themselves within this movement. And they had to work against the party leadership. So where they remained in their standing, how much of it, they could take to the women's cause is something very, conflicting, because they had to also work against not just the state patriarchy, but the patriarchy within the party. Even as recently as, a couple of decades back, Brinda Korat, she became the Politburo person. And before that, how many women were there in the Politburo? And, but, we as feminists always try to look at even small gains, and as a refugee activist, the gains are even less than that. But, one thing that these women were able to do through their, networks that worked against their party boundaries was to stop the, the Abducted Persons Rehabilitation and Restoration Act. This was not sort of implemented in this part of India, in Eastern India, in Bengal, etc. We have seen the ill effects of Abducted Persons Act in what happened to Punjab, Delhi, that part of India. But in the case of in the eastern part of India, these women, including Phull and all, they were all they actively resisted this here, because I was Renu Chakraborty's again autobiography. She writes about how they pleaded with everybody that don't let us implement this, because women, and they clearly said the women were happy to stay with their captors. Now, a lot of these were, interestingly, self-arranged relationships, which just because it was with people from a different community was seen. Sometimes they were abducted women, but even then, women, within their own communities also, how much respect were they getting at that point of time? So these women were very aware of the failures of their own patriarchy, and they questioned that patriarchy. Monikuntala Sen clearly says that I became disenchanted with the communist movement, although she remained part, at the time frame that we have, she was active in the party politics. But yes, they had to fight not just people's misunderstandings, but also direct opposition from the party patriarchy. And so there were multiple patriarchies that these women faced. And now I will come back to the question that was the first speaker, she asked this question. I think it was Apurva Chatterjee, if I'm not mistaken. The realm of and domesticity. Now, my friend Shopna Banerjee is a much better person to ask this, and I don't know. I will ask Apurna to contact Shopna, and she would be an interesting person to give a talk in this women's conclave. But yeah, I mean, of course, there is, again, within the household is a nascent space where most of the discrimination that we see in society is present there in the household. It is not a pristine space. It is actually not a safe place at all for women. And sometimes, sometimes we are very romantic about women's relationship to their maids, to the people who work. But that, again, is a very colonial relationship. And, so within that framework, so negotiating through the realm of work, through this different, discrimination and through this different vulnerabilities is, again, a very important training that women get for the public space, because the private space is in certain ways not very different from the public space. So it is not, as far as we try to make it a safe space, it is not a very safe space. So there, the negotiating skills that women develop is often utilized in the broader public sphere as well. So yes, there is a close relationship. And within the sphere of work, this household becomes a very important sort of a microscopic place where much of these class politics, caste politics, gender politics is played out. And this becomes sort of, one of those, our experimental guinea pigs, sort of, to understand what is happening in wider society, how this class politics will play out. And we are very, used to one terminology today, and I don't like that much, that is intersectionality. But this whole question of intersectionality is very visible within the household and within the realm of domestic work as well. So, as that is my take on it.
You have to respond to Bhashwati's question.
Oh God, Bhashwati, ki question ta chilo? I'm so sorry. UCRC. And yeah, Leela Nag. Yeah, of course, Mane, the thing is, there were enormous interactions. Shudu Leela Nag, there were other women also who were in leadership role within UCRC, but within UCRC also there was a lot of contests going on. And ultimately, one of the reasons why, UCRC sort of ran out its own steam is because of these contests. There is no, way that we can say that women were not part of these contests. They were part of these contests, very much so. And they took sides. It's not as if they did not take sides, but if I go through, there is a very good history of UCRC, by the way. And if we go through that, we will see how women also collaborated across party lines, within these movements. And again, on women's issues, they collaborated, and how one complemented the other. Again, this became visible within the abducted persons, how they all got together and sort of protested against the Abducted Persons Act, because this act came in 1949.
I have another question also. You talked about Monikuntala Shediner Kotha, and there is another autobiography by Konok Mukherjee also, Mone Mone. But the grievance what we find in Monikuntala's autobiography against the patriarchy, against the party system, I don't find such grievance in Konok Mukherjee's autobiography. Why is that? They both are in communist movement, and she finds no fault, no lacuna in party leadership. She's a conformist communist till her death, I think so. So, being a women, women leader, movement leader, why is she so silent about that?
Well, why are so many people silent about Stalinist purges?
Yes.
I mean, who am I to say why she is
Yeah.
silent about the leadership
That-
position? They were both activists in their own way, and why she is conforming, why she is playing the role of the establishment is something that I don't think we are in a position to
Yeah, that's
question
true.
at this point
But
of
there is a
time.
marked difference between these two.
Yeah, I understand. That is what makes the women's platform so interesting, because there are, it is futile to. ওরে অপর্ণা তোরটা বোধহয় বন্ধ করতে হবে রে।
Mic'ta. Aparna mic'ta off.
So it is, again, I said, it is futile to think of a feminist movement or women's movement for that matter, outside of the contests that were happening at that point of time in society itself. And Monikuntala was so disenchanted with that she says that she herself found that she was progressively getting disenchanted with the communist movement. So,
But she only says when she left the party.
Yeah, of course, it's very, see, Sarojini Naidu.
Not till she was within the party.
Okay, we know that Sarojini Naidu was one of the biggest admirers of Gandhi.
Yeah, right.
Gandhi was squarely behind her when she became the party president. You look at some of Sarojini Naidu's private letters. You will see, we as feminists know very well that we have to often have multiple faces. The face with which that I appeared in front of my professorship, interview, Shomitadi was there. She was one of the people interviewing me. Is that the face that I show here? Or, it's futile to say why these things happen. It happens in society. We are all multiple personas. Isn't that right? And it is important as a feminist to realize that we are donning different personas at different point of time because of different strategic reasons. And these are thought out personas. These are not unconscious personas that we take. So yes, it's very difficult to be part of the movement and to be critical of that movement, because when you're part of the movement, you're trying to, because of certain principles, you're trying to legitimize the overarching aim of that movement. But when you become completely disenchanted with that movement, you come out of the movement, that is when you become more critical of either the leadership position or the principles that were undertaken. And we know that, as women, as intellectuals, often we let it go. Sometimes, people like us, like you, I'm sure all of us, who do not let it go are victimized as a result of, because of the stands that we take. And it is not easy to sort of, put your neck on the line and say, yes, this is where I will protest. So, and especially of a generation for whom, who made our passage into this activism possible because of their own experiences. If we sit with our list of discriminations, with our list of grievances, that would be unending. At least these people, could transcend above this list of grievances and could concentrate on, micro level activism that actually makes our lives so much more possible.
And I think in this perspective, the AIWC women also played an important role.
Absolutely. I didn't again bring out the All India Women's Conference women, because I have written quite a bit in my, one of my articles on the AIWC women. And
I would love to know where it is, Pallavi.
I can send you the link later.
Okay,
if Aparna or you contact me, I'll send you that link. So yes, and Ashoka Gupta again was one of the people that I met personally, and I got interested in AIWC. And AIWC again has a very rich history. And in their 1927 convention, what to me was very interesting was they questioned the fact that when you say that a women's curricula has to be so that they can be good mothers, the Maharani of Bhopal, she said, why are we not saying that men's curricula should be geared so that they can be better fathers? You know,
Right.
it's not
And-
that just one woman raised this voice or raised this question. It is
There are several names we can talk about. Yeah, and they even
Shall
question
we ask
us.
if there are other questions from other people?
Yeah. Sorry.
It's becoming a dialogue rather than.
I have a quick
Yes,
question,
yes.
if I may. Can people hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, please go
Um,
ahead.
Hello, I'm Suranjan, and first of all, thank you very much, the Women's History Conclave. This is, it's been a privilege to be here and listening about this, and thank you, Paula, also, that was very illuminating. It's very serendipitous. I came to listen to a lecture about my mother, and I am not a historian, although I do have slightly above average diffusion of historical awareness, I think, where I grew up because of how I grew up. But I live in Baltimore, and one of the things, I'm a technologist. I look at technology research, and some of it is in social applications. And I've been looking in Baltimore in the sort of impoverished inner city urbanscape that America is, especially the Eastern Front. And Baltimore is a prime example. We've been looking at there's this talk about digital divide and how it's always been very top down. There's not been much ground up study, especially in the kind of area I look in. And we've been looking at technological entrepreneurship. What are they looking at? Why not? And this whole idea of network communities that you talked about, how these networking communities grew up. And I think that's very fascinating, because I think I can think about this because we are trying to do a sort of technological intervention as well, to see if we can build up technology entrepreneurship. So not really a question. Can I reach out to and ask you for some of these sort of writings where I can understand how these networking communities were grown, because they were ground up. And I think they can be transported to another society, a lot of these. So I would love to read and understand them. And thank you, everybody, again. This was it just kind of suddenly I had this, something went on in my head Saturday morning, and I just loved that. Thank you so much.
Thank you also for being with us. Yeah.
Yes. Pauladi, I have a small question. Okay. I was reading Monikuntala Sen's Shediner Kotha a few days back. She was recounting her interactions with the women of a particular village in East Bengal. These women were all into prostitution, but driven by poverty to take up prostitution as their vocation. And she's also written about the sexual exploitation of women by the military personnel around. During the Second World War, that is. Just for a fistful of rice, women were being lured by these military men and sexually abused. So I feel that, she didn't talk much about them. She just briefly alluded to them and her interactions with them. I think that these women leaders, they were not sufficiently vocal about this aspect of the experiences of women during, say, the famine or the World War or the partition, their sexual exploitation by by military men or the Jodhars and also the men in power. So, do you find a kind of rural elite subaltern divide in the way they looked at these women? A kind of snobbery in their attitude. I find that they are looking down upon these women.
Monikuntala actually was extremely sympathetic. In fact, one of her first interactions with Gandhi was when Gandhi talked about these women, the prostitutes. But, even Gandhi had a very patriarchal look at these prostitutes. I mean, it was different, but he talked about how, these women were causes. Yes, as I said, the women's movement at that point of time was very divided on the basis of class, on the basis of other questions as well. Religion also sometimes, it was the Queen of Bhopal who was in AIWC. It's not just run-of-the-mill women who found places or leadership roles in these movements. So yes, but Aparna, all through my life, I've always spoken about these criticalities or critical interventions within the feminist movement, but progressively with age, I'm realizing how difficult it was for these women to transcend the boundaries that were set against them. We can, as I said, we can always say that these women did not talk about sexuality, did not question, they did not question the discrimination faced by lesbian women. We can keep questioning, but one thing we cannot get over the fact is that they made our path a little less problematic. And that is why we can take up the issues that we are taking up today. Otherwise, if these women were not there questioning the kind or raising the questions that they were raising, we would not be in this position today. And I think the feminist movement has come a long way. We should not be self-congratulating at all, because there's a huge long distance to go. We ourselves realize the limitations that we face and the limitations that we create for ourselves. But, experiences in life shows us that the criticality that they had and the obstructions that they faced, and, often these women had to leave their home because they would not be tolerated within their homes. We talk about, ghore baire, why even Rabindranath could not perceive a future from a woman who was transcending the home in certain ways. So, and we look at him as a great internationalist. So, considering the limitations that these women had, we can always be more critical, and it is necessary to be introspective and critical. So I completely agree to that. But and I know that important questions on sexuality were not raised, but they questioned too, and that's the reason why Uttaradi and her generation could question stronger. And today the mantle is on you all to question it further and more critically. So, it is always, it's better to look towards the future, but build on the past.
That's a very pithy formulation. Any other questions from anybody else? I can't see anything. Will you put something in the chat box so I know you have a question? If anybody does have a question, no. So it is now, I think 8:30, is it?
8:32.
Yeah. So shall we then start the process of closing today's program, since there doesn't seem to be any further questions? So let me then say a few words to wrap up today's program. Subhashda spoke. When he spoke, he talked about Uttaradi giving us at the School of Women's Studies, Jadavpur University, the Pritilata Wadedar lecture, in which she spoke about Beena Dash. And that came out as a little booklet. As he mentioned, with the archival material, a very small taste of the archival material that Uttaradi had based that talk and then the essay on. So I remember with great fondness this link I had with Uttaradi, which is our interest in and concern with archival material. And the way we were able to exchange ideas about archival material and to what it meant to include an archival material in a paper, and what methodological shift that involved. We had a long discussions on these and other things, including a great deal to do with Veena Das. The link I find with those discussions I had with Uttaradi and Paula's paper today is that Veena Das, Uttaradi spoke about Veena Das as a terrorist, that the incident of her shooting and then going to jail. But Veena Das had a whole other career when she came out of jail, as a parliament, as a politician who stood for election, won elections, who was involved in organizing labor, in other kinds of a variety of different kinds of politics. And Veena Das would have intersected in her work with some of the people Paula spoke of today, and occupied a very similar kind of political spectrum. But she, as what I have seen of material, but we don't know a great deal about many of these women. As far as I know, I haven't seen any involvement in the refugee movement. But women like Veena Das were very active in many aspects of the movement. So let me jump a little bit and speak about a person who will address some of the questions raised today evening, and that is a woman called Sukumari Choudhury. And I know about Sukumari Choudhury because another friend of Uttaradi's, who happens to be my aunt by marriage, Manju Chattopadhyay, interviewed Sukumari Choudhury and wrote a piece on her. Sukumari Choudhury was a refugee woman who grew up in a refugee settlement. And what they had to do in those times, a very ordinary, very, very poor at that time woman. And they periodically, the police would come to evict these refugee settlements. And it was the task of the women, she says in her interview, to collect household utensils. So somebody was asking about domestic work. Khunti, hata, kodai, whatever was available in ready at hand, they would take these implements and go to the front to fight the police. And Sukumari said later that that was her training. It is by fighting in that fashion against the police in the anti-eviction movements that she later learned how to do labor movement. And she was a worker herself. She worked in Bengal Lab. She became involved in the trade union movement as a worker in Bengal Lab. So this is not an elite woman, a upper caste woman, but not an elite woman, a poor working woman. And she was able to combine these various kinds of politics, her experience in refugee politics and her experience in trade union movement. So there are so many unknown stories. And I really congratulate Paula, not only on the new work that she is doing, but also in her very perceptive comments that she made about the limitations of historical actors in their historical time and how we can assess how the contributions people make in their own historical time. So it was a wonderful experience listening to you, Paula, and we will look forward to more work on these lines from you. Thank you. I hand over to the organizers to wind up.
Okay.
Can I just add a point here? As Shomita said about Bina Dash, Aparna, mic check.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I just found in being a parliamentarian of Congress, representing Congress after independence, she was also critical of the Congress government policy towards the refugees, and she raised issues in Parliament. I mean, in the Legislative Assembly for the refugees also. Yeah. In that way, she played a part in refugee movement, maybe.
Okay, now.
So,
Okay, so the vote of thanks, now the formal part. Now, thank you very much, Professor Paula Banerjee, for readily agreeing to deliver the first Uttara Chakraborty Memorial Lecture, despite your extremely busy schedule. I'm very happy to know that you would have felt bad if I had not invited you. Of course, you were the first choice. তুমি না বললে আমরা হয়তো অন্য কাউকে বলতাম, কিন্তু প্রথমেই তোমার নামটাই আমাদের মনে এসেছে। And thank you, Shomita Di, for being with us as always. We are deeply indebted to you both. Shomita Di took her booster dose today, earlier this evening, earlier this afternoon, and she's back with us. So hats off to you, Shomita Di. আমরা হলে হয়তো ভ্যাকসিনের পর শুয়ে পড়তাম একদম flat হয়ে।
our booster dose.
Our booster. So thank you both, and thank you, sir. Thank you, Subhash Babu, Professor Subhash Ranjan Chakraborty, for sharing your memories of Uttaradi and recounting her achievements and her daily struggles as a historian who loved exploring unconventional vistas and charting unfamiliar terrains. Your words have made us all very, very emotional. আমাদের জন্য আজকে অত্যন্ত এটা আবেগঘন মুহূর্ত. And thanks to Shuranjan for being with us, for joining us on this occasion. And thanks also to the other members of Uttaradi's family, her near and dear ones, her dear students. Thank you all for joining us from different parts of the world. So our thanks to those who have been with us today. I mean, are some of the veteran historians of have been with us today. Uttaradi's very, very close friend, bosom friend, Malika Di, Professor Malika Begum has been with us today. Professor Asha Islam has joined us. Thank you both. আমি জানি না ওপার বাংলা থেকে আর কেউ জয়েন করেছেন কিনা, সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ জানাই। Professor Romeo Sen, Professor Ramkrishna Chattopadhyay, they too have joined today. Thank you all, and thanks to all for your support, your cooperation, and please be with us. Please, we will be holding more and more lectures and webinars in the coming months. হ্যাঁ স্যার কিছু বলবেন স্যার প্লিজ?
আমি জাস্ট একটা পয়েন্ট,
হ্যাঁ নিশ্চয়ই স্যার। হ্যাঁ
আমাদের ছোট ছেলে ছিল, ওর একটা ডক্টর অ্যাপয়েন্টমেন্টের জন্য ইয়ে টু লিভ, আর তার থেকে ইম্পর্টেন্ট হচ্ছে আমি যার কথা বলেছিলাম ফাতিমা পেস, ফাতিমা চ্যাটবক্স says thank you for thank Paula for this excellent lecture. Fatima did join. I said she might.
That's great.
She did join.
He's still here. She's still here.
She's still here. I just saw that. And just to share this with you. And thank you, Fatima, so much. It is a pleasure to know that you've joined.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes.
Fatima, how could I forget you?
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
And we should also thank Joyce Smita for making a wonderful poster, and Rushoti, who is making this program live in Facebook. So they are giving the technical support without which we cannot organize.
Not live. She's recording the program and then it will be uploaded on Facebook.
it's almost the same thing. It will be recorded and it will be telecasted in Facebook also. So thank you everyone for being with us this evening, and so good night and good evening or good day. I don't know, Shomita, it may be in the afternoon. Good afternoon to you also, and thank you all. Okay.
Jerry, Professor Geraldine
very
Fox is with us. Sorry,
Yeah.
I forgot to mention her name. Jerry is with us, and it's morning for her. So she's joined us from the USA, and it's early morning. And thank you, Jerry, for being with us today. And are you still there? Please speak for a few minutes. Jerry, are you there?
Yes. It's not an easy time for me to speak, okay? Because
Oh,
I have a lot of responsibility in the morning. Okay.
yeah, we know. Please, yes.
So I'm just listening, okay? Thank you so much, Paula. Nice to see all of you. Asha, hi. Okay, nice
Kolkata is missing you, Jerry.
questions. Okay, bye.
You.
Bye. Okay. Bye.
সমিতা
Thank
দি
you all.
কলকাতায় আসছো? বলছি কলকাতায় আসছো?
এই unmute করো।
মিউট করা।
কয়েকদিনেই পৌঁছে যাচ্ছি, পার্টি রেডি করে রাখ।
হ্যাঁ, কবে আসছো বলো?
আসলে কোয়ারেন্টাইনে ঢুকিয়ে দেবে।
আমরা কোয়ারেন্টাইন ভেদ করে চলে যাব। আমরা খুব ইন্টারপ্রেট।
আর আমি তো বুস্টার নিয়ে আসছি, কাজে আমার তো চিন্তাই নেই।
না, তোমার কোনো চিন্তা নেই। তুমি রণবেদা তোমরা দুজন বুস্টার পেয়েছো, আমাকে তো দেয়নি এখনো।
যা
হ্যাঁ, রঞ্জন, I will get in touch তোমার
thank
সাথে
you.
কথা বলবো।
হ্যাঁ, আমি বাবার থেকে নিয়ে নেবো।
বসে কেন তুমি প্রশ্ন করো?
সবিতা দুটো নাম পাঠিয়েছে, আমি তোকে দিয়ে দেবো। সবিতা দুজনের নাম বলেছে, লিখে দিয়েছে।
Thank you.
রেচেল ওয়েবারের অনেকগুলো পাবলিকেশন আছে,
নীলাঞ্জনা
নীলাঞ্জনা চ্যাটার্জির পিএইচডি থিসিস
আচ্ছা।
পাবলিকেশন নেই।
But I should be able to find the thesis. Thank you.
তোমার ছাত্রীর বিয়েতে আসছো? সমিতা দি, তোমার ছাত্রীর বিয়েতে আসছো?
ছাত্রীর বিয়েতে আসা খুব মুশকিল হবে, আমি পৌঁছবো কিন্তু কোয়ারেন্টাইন থাকবে তো।
ও, তোমার বুস্টার নিয়েও কোয়ারেন্টাইন?
জানি না, জিজ্ঞাসা করবো যে বুস্টার থাকলে কোয়ারেন্টাইন মাফ করবে
আমার
কিনা।
মনে হয় না ও কোয়ারেন্টাইন হবে। যদি বিয়েতে থাকো খুব মজা হয়, আমিও যাব।
কোয়ারেন্টাইন থেকে মুক্তি পাবে বলে মনে
যাওয়ার
হয়।
কথা, আমাদের তো অনেক প্ল্যান হয়েছিল।
খুব মজা। চলে এসো। তুমি কবে আসছো জানিও।
হ্যাঁ, জানাবো।
ওকে, অপর্ণা,
ঠিক আছে।
বেরোলাম রে।
ওকে, থ্যাংক ইউ।
Thank you, Baladi. Thank
Thank you.
Everyone, yeah.
Bye.
সুভাষ,
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
বলা, তোমার সাথে কাল রাত্রে কথা হবে। অপর্ণা বা সতীশ,
সুভাষ
কথা হবে। তুমি এসো, আমরা একসাথে বসবো, কথা হবে তখন। শিওর। Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.